Hey friends, welcome to the Energy Independent Show. Today we have a special guest to help us understand what smart energy technology looks like on the utility side. So today from the Smart Energy Power Alliance, we have Natalia. So welcome to the show, Natalia.
Thanks. Thanks, Les, for having me.
Sure thing. So can you tell us a little bit about yourself and what motivates you in the energy industry?
Yeah, absolutely. So again, Natalia Mathura. I work for Smart Electric Power Alliance, and I've got about 20 years experience in the utility sector and the energy sector. I've been at Sepa for just under a year. Prior to that, I spent 14 years at one of the Exelon operating companies, Pepco Holdings, and they operate across 4 states. And prior to that, honestly, I was a utility consultant for KPMG. So lots and lots of experience in the energy sector. And I think one of the things that keeps me coming back is I love talking to people who are experts in their field, much like you're doing right now, and learning from them and connecting the dots to other people who are doing things, but running into hurdles and then connecting those people and those ideas. I think this notion of cultivating connections and stakeholder engagement is really critical to my career, and it's what keeps me excited to learn more.
Yeah, it is exciting to learn about energy. Some people might say that, how are you going to talk about energy every day, Monday through Friday? I'm like, I don't know. My daughter doesn't understand, but I do. So at least there's other people who get it and appreciate it. So thanks again for joining us. So on question 2, can you tell us about the Smart Energy Power Alliance and your role there?
Absolutely. So the Smart Energy Power Alliance is a nonprofit mission focused on a carbon-free energy system by 2050. They are a non-advocacy group, so no lobbying. And they have a membership base of over 700 utilities, both IOUs, investor-owned utilities, munis, co-ops. They have over 70% of the U.S. Public Service Commissions as members, and they have hundreds and hundreds of energy technology platform service providers who are also members of SEPA. And our main thrust of achieving our mission is through content and conferences. That whole notion really of disseminating information and creating and cultivating connections. And so they do that through what they've coined as their 4 pathways. It's a way to kind of organize the content. They have a grid integration pathway, which is all about the standards that makes everything work from a technology and utility standpoint. They also have a regulatory innovation pathway where Janet Gale Besser is focused on really creating content that moves the needle for regulatory agencies to create new utility business models and constructs that allow utilities to actually be more innovative than they have in the past and incentivizes them to do that. We have a 3rd pathway, which is electric transportation. You know, Erica Myers, really successful in terms of disseminating new information about not only EV programs at utilities and technologies and chargers, but now moving into the fleet sphere and how to engage fleets to really move the needle on decarbonizing the transportation sector. As my colleague Erica likes to say, it is the opportunity of a century in terms of all of the stakeholders that can really get on board. And then 4th, my pathway. I'm the pathway lead for utility business models. And it's a pretty broad topic. I've seen it kind of discussed in 2 main veins. One is as a cost construct within the regulatory environment. And so again, how do you incentivize utilities to engage in new technologies? And then the other, and this is the one I'm focused on mostly, is this notion of new technologies and new business models and new programs that utilities can understand, ask questions about, and begin to pursue within their own walls.
Well, that's great. I like the approach. It's very thorough. And then on the mission, besides the approach, what's the mission of SEPA?
So the mission is a carbon-free energy system by 2050. So they are very focused on incentivizing not only utilities, but other large corporations, small corporations, to really start to make credible movements and choose targets for a sustainable energy future, whether it's internally in their own operations or through the partners they engage with, or their state agencies, to let them know that's something that they want legislation to pursue.
Awesome. Well, it's a noble goal. I really like that. I think we can agree. And on question number 4, what or who are the stakeholders that Sepal works with?
Yeah, so I mentioned this a little bit in the beginning. It's investor-owned utilities, it's municipal utilities, it's co-ops in the rural areas of the U.S. It's project developers, wind and solar, microgrid developers. It's nonprofits like ourselves. It's lots and lots of government agencies, which I love to see coming to the table, because I believe in this notion of partnerships, and I think this smart communities and connected communities, which we'll talk about later, really relies on not just the utility getting it, but the city agencies getting it. I think that's really important, and we have a lot of them as members. And then also we have the regulatory agencies in many of the states.
Right. Well, you have your hands full, that's for sure. And everyone is holding hands in a big effort there, it sounds like. And on some of the challenges, question number 5 is, what pressing issues do stakeholders face in the transition to smart grids?
So, being the principal of utility business models, I'm going to come at it from a utility standpoint. I think utilities have a charge that they believe in very strongly, which is managing a constant equilibrium of supply and demand. And I know what keeps them up at night is being able to do that with minimum outages, both in frequency and duration. And I think they're moving in the direction of being able to integrate non-wires alternatives and DERs, both on the utility side, as well as being able to manage what the consumers are putting on their premises. I think them moving continuously in that direction in terms of an integrated planning process, I think that's one of the things that needs to happen. I think it'll be really interesting to see how very recently Trump's executive order on smart grid devices impacts the movement. I think it'll be short term in terms of smart grid development. I think we'll move past that. I think one of the other things that, from a utility standpoint, which is a huge win, and I just want to call out, the FCC just approved the 900 megahertz just for utility, secure utility network engagement. So I think that's going to help them, particularly in rural areas, but honestly everywhere, not only manage distribution automation and field devices, but that whole notion of customer controlled devices within the home. If you're going to have, any sense of real security, energy security that Trump's order is trying to get to, you definitely need the ability to have secure network connections for the utility. So I'm excited by that last one.
Well, that's great. It's interesting how technology can be exciting, and we learn every day. So where can people learn more about Sepa and the efforts of Sepa?
Yeah, so you can go to sepa.org, and we have a whole host of information that you can pull down. You're also more than welcome to link in with me on LinkedIn, and I'm happy to answer any questions or to forward questions to our research team.
Awesome. Well, we appreciate you joining us. If you're watching and you're enjoying the show, we encourage you to like the Facebook page, facebook.com/CIG Solar. We have Natalia Mathura with us and other experts all the time. So we encourage you to join us in the energy revolution. It's an exciting time. And on question number 6, Natalia, what are some examples of progress being made to modernize the grid?
Yeah, so I thought about this one, and I think I want to come at it from a regulatory and traditional UBM standpoint. I think the ones that call out to me are obviously the New York Rev. I think what that did really clearly was change the incentive model and start to put this notion of performance-based incentives in front of the utilities around the U.S. I think that Maryland actually has done a really good job, PC 44. They started to open up um, different working groups that worked in parallel relative to EVs and to storage and to customer choice. I think that that stakeholder model is something that I would love to see deployed around the US. This notion of, having what should an EV program at the utility look like, and having ChargePoint at the table and EVgo at the table to also provide their input, and making sure that it is truly a collaborative effort. I think that they did an excellent job at that, and they're continuing to do that. I do want to call out DC. I think DC is a great example of this notion, again, of collaboration between DC Council, who has 100% renewable goal by 2050, and that working in concert with the MedSys driver program within the DC PSC. And so what I think is really unique about what DC is pursuing in terms of smart grid is this whole notion of planning, because it all comes back to planning. So I love that they're pushing the envelope on how a utility integrates non-wires alternatives, how they plan for it, how they do a benefit cost analysis of it, and really kind of setting a methodology and standard for moving forward in that role. So I think those are the three that really come to mind.
Awesome. Well, you mentioned electric vehicles, and we live in challenging times now. We've seen in the past where, like with Fukushima in Japan, power outages happened, and we've seen some developments, mostly from Japanese manufacturers, on vehicle to grid technology. On question number 7, I'm curious what you think the role vehicle to grid technology could play in a more resilient electric grid.
Yeah. So I love the idea of it. I think it's a little bit more longer term out than near term. I had the privilege of working on a V2G, single V2G project while I was at the utility, and I learned a few things. Mm-hmm. One, I learned that the interconnection cost in the whole process is one, more costly than I would have imagined, and two, just a little bit more time consuming than I would have imagined. I think also when you go and you try to evaluate, you do a benefit cost analysis of what the customer might get back from an ancillary services at PJM. It was pretty de minimis, actually. What I like to see is, and what I think was beneficial at the end of that project, was that it was B2B. So this notion of having this community center be able to offset some of its demand charges because it had a bus that was sitting there fully charged and not used in the summer. I love that idea, and it showed real value at the end of the project, and we won the funds for it. So,
well, that's really exciting. I think it's a great idea. I think that in times of power outages, it would be super useful. Maybe not just net metering, but maybe just keeping the lights on when the power is out. I think that technology could be super useful, and appreciate your insight there. So question number 8 is, about blockchain. Do you see potential in blockchain for utilities and end users, and kind of a peer-to-peer sort of deal where, the accountability of the blockchain system could play a role?
Yeah, so I'm not an expert in blockchain. I have been following it for a couple of years. I love the idea of transactive energy. I think if they can get it right for the banking industry, then it would be something that you could then start to consider to use for local purposes. I have a guy that I would love for you to interview about what they're doing with blockchain in the banking industry.
What's his name?
His name is Joe Gagan.
Hey, Joe, if you're listening, love to have you on. So question number 9, Natalia, is, what does a modern utility grid and energy market look like?
Yeah. So I think it's all of the things that I mentioned. It's the utility having a clear model in its service territory, and it's not one and done. It's really defined by what that region needs. Mm-hmm. So maybe it's an integrated utility, maybe it's just a DSO, maybe it's pure play distribution, but it's also having them ready to plan, integrate DERs, recognizing that they're no longer the sole decision maker in terms of where the energy comes from, and being able to integrate with that energy that's being put not only on residential sites, but small commercial and large industrial. I do think transactive energy is a part of that future. I just don't know what the timeline is for it.
Right. Well, at the rate Sepa is working and other utilities, I think that could be sooner, and we'll be very glad to have some people talk about that on the show soon, and including Joe. So we'll look forward to that. But before we let you go, Natalia, we always ask, question number 10 is, in these trying times, do you have a favorite quote or something uplifting you could share before we go?
Yeah. Okay, so I'm gonna go off script here. So I've been home for 9 to 10 weeks. I'm not sure which, with my two kids. They're great kids, I swear.
I bet.
A 15-year-old who sticks to himself, kind of stays in his room, plays it quiet, does chess and other video games, and I imagine some schoolwork. And then a really precocious 6-year-old who you would not believe does not bother me all day for 8 hours. She's that good. The mess at the end of that 8 hours is insane, but the creativity is unbelievable. So she has turned cardboard boxes, as most kids would, into electric vehicles that she then hops around. She snorkels in the bathtub. She has 4 and 5 hour Zoom play dates. And yes. So I am very lucky in that regards. And I do think, so I'll say this is a quote from my son. I don't know if it's particularly uplifting, but it's very interesting.
It could be real. We live in real times.
We live in real times. And he came out and he said, "Mom, can you tell Anna to stop having parties in the bathtub?" I say no. I say have those parties. I say be creative, get out the washable crowns, and create and ideate, because I think this is a special time. It's a special time for us and our families. It's also going to be a really creative time for a lot of people. I know that there's a huge downside, but I think that this is a time when people will do things and spend time thinking about solutions that they wouldn't have had time to do before. And it will be energy solutions, and it will be workforce solutions, and it will be community solutions. So I say to my son, no, I'm not going to tell Anna to stop having parties in the bathtub. And I hope everyone else, finds some creative inspiration in the time they're spending at home.
Absolutely. Well, that was some great insight. I'll share before I let you go. My oldest daughter, she's 6, and I was running around the house like, yay, so excited. And she asked me, "What's so exciting?" And I told her, "Lighting up the world. It's so exciting." She goes, "Yeah, that's not that exciting." And then my 4-year-old, who just turned 4, said, "How is that going to work?" And I had to think, how am I going to explain this to a 4-year-old? But she didn't let me finish. And she said, "Yeah, that was awkward." So anyways, but yeah, to us, it's exciting, and we're doing it for them. And if they can sit there and think, and we can think and be innovative, that's how things get done. So
it's extreme parenting. This whole notion, right, of getting our world ready for climate change is extreme parenting.
Right. Well, it's extremely trying to have 4 kids here at my house and 2 at yours and others. So if we can get through this, we can get through anything, including climate change.
Agreed.
So, yeah, don't step on too many Legos over there. Try not to over here.
You have no idea.
Yeah. Oh, I bet. So, but yeah, tell your kids to keep it up. And thank you for joining us. Thank you all for listening and getting excited about the energy revolution like Natalia and I. Our kids are going to be have a better world for it. So we encourage you to tune in next time. Join us. Have a great weekend. We'll see you next time. And thanks again, Natalia, for your time. We appreciate it.
Thank you.